So our next speaker, Jeremy Fisher, is a true innovator, and he has pioneered the 24-hour sharing feature that you know now being adopted by Snapchat and by Instagram. So he was the first person who really created and innovated around that. So I think that's like a huge accomplishment. Besides that, he is a true technology entrepreneur who has also sold his last company to Yahoo. And he is right now the CEO of River, a new kind of search engine. And I have absolutely no idea what he's going to talk about because this title is How to Slay a Dragon. So I'll be as amazed as you are, hopefully, by what he has to share. So please welcome Jeremy Fisher on stage. Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay, so thank you, Philip. So how do you slay a dragon? And there's a lot of dragons out there, and they're big and scary. There's Facebook, and this dragon lives in the water. And there's Uber, and this dragon has fire. You've got Instagram. Instagram lives on top of a mountain. Snapchat. A lot of different dragons out there, and most people who try to fight dragons end up losing. And so that's pretty intimidating. It's easy to get discouraged by that. But of course, these dragons only exist because they defeated the dragons that lived before them. So the question is, how do you go up against one of these dragons and actually win? The obvious answer is that you compete by building a better dragon, right? Because the best products win, and that's almost obviously true. So to build a better dragon, you need to have all of the same features as the old dragon, plus a couple new ones, and you have to be bigger, and you have to be faster, with hotter fire, and so on. And so to do that in your head, you've created this really badass dragon, and you imagine that if you build that dragon, that you can win. But my counterintuitive advice is don't build a better dragon. This approach, where you draw up a spec and you try to compete feature for feature and build a better dragon, is, I would argue, the main reason that smart people build dumb products. Because when you try to build a better dragon, before long you end up with a product that looks like this. And I call this the more is more mindset. And this approach is doomed for 3 reasons. First off, new products with lots of features end up being extremely frustrating to use. And second, because they're new, they lack the network effects of the old dragon, and so they end up being ghost towns. And Path was a product that made this mistake. They tried to compete feature for feature against a version of Facebook that had already gone through years and years of evolution and education of their users and network effects, and they really didn't end up being able to compete because they were trying to build something better. Third, your dragon is going to lack the distribution network of the old product. And a great example of this is Betamax, which was an ostensibly better product than VHS, but lost because it had worse distribution, among other things. And there's this great Harvard Business School article that states that you need to be 9 times better to win. And that's because consumers overvalue what they already use by 3 times. And as a creator, you probably think that your product is more amazing than it actually is, and you think it's probably about 3 times better, and so you multiply 3 times 3 and you get 9x. And it's very, very hard to build something that's actually perceptibly 9 times better than the thing that came before it. And so instead of trying to build something better, I argue that you want to do one thing. You don't want to build a better dragon that does lots of things. You want to build a new dragon that's different, that does one thing. And that's what all the dragons that I showed you before did. And so all those dragons, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, they didn't start out looking scary and big and doing lots of things. They started out looking something like this, right? So they might look like this today, but the first version of them looked more like this. This is more like the version that kickstarted their success. And then they got feedback from users and they iterated, and so the next version looked something like this, and they kept iterating, and the next version looked like this. But eventually they ended up at a product that looks like this after many, many years. And it's that mess that creates your opportunity, right? Because the more features that you have, the lower productivity goes, it becomes complicated. and it creates new openings for you to compete with them. And so to capitalize on that opportunity, there's 3 idea discovery methods that I'm going to go over. They're called the zoom, the twist, and the missing link. So the first is the zoom. And the way the zoom works is you zoom in on a single feature of that big competitor, and you realize that each of those single features are potentially whole startups just by themselves. So you zoom in and you build a knife, or you zoom in and you build a scissor. And a great example of this is a little dragon slayer called Instagram, right? And so when Instagram came out, Facebook had all sorts of features. But Instagram ended up being really scary to Facebook because they zoomed in and they just did one thing really well, right? This was the first version of Instagram. It was just for sharing photos, individual photos at a time with filters, and that was something different. They didn't try to be better than Facebook. They just tried to zoom in, do one thing, and compete with Facebook in that way. And it's worth mentioning that Instagram actually had to zoom in on itself as well. So the first version of Instagram was a product called Bourbon, and Bourbon was more of a kind of new dragon, right? Bourbon tried to do everything, and it didn't work at all, and so they zoomed in on the one part of Bourbon that was working, which was the photo sharing part, and they ended up succeeding. The next idea discovery method is the twist. And so if the dragon you're competing against looks like a pocket knife with other stuff, the way that you do the twist is you kind of pivot that. And you realize that instead of building a pocket knife with other stuff, you twist it, you build a pliers with other stuff. So in other words, you figure out a new core use case that isn't being served by that existing product, and you reorient the whole thing around that new core use case. And so an example of a product that did this was Snapchat, right? So Snapchat launched with disappearing photos, and that wasn't a feature that Facebook had at all, but they realized that there was an element of Facebook that this fact that all of your information was stored over time presented a new opportunity for a more ephemeral product. So they kind of twisted the whole thing around, launched Snapchat, and of course, it became very successful. And as you can tell, this is a very simple product, this first version of Snapchat. It doesn't look like it did today. It didn't look like Facebook did at the time. It was just extremely simple. At Days, which is the startup that I sold to Yahoo, we did the same kind of twist against Instagram. So we realized that Instagram was all about sharing single photos, and we realized that there was an opportunity to move from sharing single photos to sharing 24 hours in your life, to sharing your whole day. And so that was a twist that we did that's now been adopted in Snapchat and in Instagram and even in Facebook and WhatsApp and many other products as well. The third idea discovery method is one that I call the missing link. And so we're trained to see this evolution from the single feature product to the 2 product to the 3 feature product as being an evolution towards something that's increasingly better. But what it causes us to miss is that these previous versions are in many cases better suited for certain things than the later ones. And so this is an image that I've seen floating around a lot of product management blog posts, and on the surface it seems true, right? A scooter is better than a skateboard, and a bike is better than a scooter, and so on and so forth. But there's a new startup that was a potential dragon slayer called Bird, and they realized that that image presented a missing link. There was a missing opportunity that hadn't been seen by Uber and the other ride-sharing startups. And what they saw is that this evolution corresponded to increased happiness for long trips. But in the context of short trips, it was almost the reverse, right? So cars actually weren't good for short trips. For short trips, maybe a scooter was actually the best thing. And so Bird has very quickly launched and become a unicorn by offering this dockless electric scooter. And they found this missing opportunity that was overlooked in that initial view of evolution. So the fourth point that I want to discuss is to embrace the unfamiliar. And that's because familiarity can be a fatal weakness in products. And a good example of this is local search. So way back when, Yahoo Yellow Pages was the leading company in local search, and Google wanted to compete against them. And so they started out by trying to build a better dragon, right? And these 2 products looked pretty similar. But Google was pretty confident that they provided better results, but the problem was that none of their users could really tell because the products looked too similar. And so what happened next was that Google invented maps, right? And so they combined this idea of a list and they put these venues on a map, and they realized that by launching something that actually looked different, they could take users out of their comfort zone and make them appreciate this different frame of mind and how their product was actually superior to that Yahoo Yellow Pages product. So if you're going to fight a dragon, you've got to be brave. And as Phil Schiller says, you might require courage. And we remember the iPod as an immediately transformative product, but the reception at the time was actually a lot less positive. So this was one of the first reviews of the iPod. No wireless, less space than a Nomad, lame. And this is the Nomad, in case you don't remember it. And so building a product this way, where you're not trying to build a better dragon, is pretty scary because it's going to feel like you haven't done enough. You're going to have less storage. You're not going to have wireless. You're going to lack all of these things that your competitors have, which is what you believe makes them better. But in fact, it's your lack of all those things that's going to allow you to ultimately compete with them. And so even though it's tiring, you have to stick with it. You have to be brave. And by doing that, you can win. So to summarize, you don't want to build a better dragon. You want to do one thing, and you want to do that really well. For your idea discovery, you want to take one of three approaches. You want to zoom in, you want to twist, or you want to find the missing link. You want to embrace the unfamiliar, and you want to be brave. And if you are a talented engineer and you're interested in taking on one of the biggest dragons of all, please send me an email here. I'd love to talk to you. My current startup, we're building a new kind of search engine. So this is really a scary dragon to go against, but I think that we have a compelling approach. And thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And I apologize for the tech issues.
No worries.
But we're happy that we managed to slay the tech dragon at the end. So maybe somebody should build a simpler computer to present instead of all of the complex stuff that we have.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you for joining us. So with that, we are almost at the coffee break. But before that, I want to welcome Dan Miaescu, who is one of the leading VCs in Romania, on stage. And he's going to host a workshop after this. So please tell us a few words about the workshop and what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, good morning. Raising money. Raising money looks often like a bit of dark art, kind of you feel it, it's so complex and all that. But the truth is, it's not that complex, it's not that complicated if you do the right steps. So what we'll do at the third floor, I think at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, it's to talk about simple things that you can do to prepare for that moment when you'll face investors. And if you prepare well, it will happen for you. Okay, I'll meet you at 5.
Thank you very much, Dan. And for the rest of you, I'm looking to welcome you back again at 4:50 when we'll continue with the final track of the day. Thank you very much, Dan.